Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
This happened about 10 years ago when I was 19. My little cousin was turning 5, and he was just getting into reading. The kid loved books, picture books, easy readers, anything with colorful pages and simple stories. His birthday was coming up, and I figured supporting his reading habit was the best gift I could give. So there I was, wandering into Borders Books on a quiet afternoon. The store had that distinctive bookstore smell, paper, coffee from their little cafe, and the faint scent of whatever cleaning product they used on the carpets. I headed straight for the children's section, which was easy to spot with its colorful carpet that marked the boundary between adult literature and kid stuff. I started browsing through the shelves, picking up books that looked like they might catch my cousin's interest. Some of them were actually pretty funny. I laughed at a book about a dinosaur trying to fit into a tiny bed, and another about a dog who thought he was a superhero. Children's books are hilarious sometimes, and I wasn't ashamed to enjoy them. When I was flipping through the pages of one book, I felt someone poke my shoulder. Hard. I turned around to find an employee looking at me. She looked to be in her 30s, with her hair pulled back in a tight ponytail and wearing the standard Borders uniform shirt. The employee told me I needed to leave the area immediately. When I asked why, she said this section was for children 12 and under only, and adults without children weren't allowed there. I tried to explain I was just looking for a birthday present for my cousin, but she cut me off. She said she didn't see any children with me and that it was inappropriate for an adult man to be hanging around the children's section alone. I was stunned. She continued her lecture about store policy and customer comfort, speaking loudly enough that other shoppers were starting to stare. I felt my face getting hot with embarrassment. Finally, when she paused for breath, I decided I'd had enough. I told her I understood and that I would make sure to leave the children's section since no adults were allowed there. I took about 10 steps to my left, which put me just outside the carpeted area that marked the children's section. The employee stood there watching me. I waited, and just a couple minutes later, I spotted a couple with 2 young kids heading toward the children's area. When they crossed into the carpeted zone, I approached them. I told them that their kids were welcome to browse the children's section, but as adults over the age of 12, they would need to wait outside this area because it was store policy. The mother looked confused and said that didn't make sense because they needed to supervise their children. The father asked who I was and if I worked at the store. I explained that I didn't work there, but I had just been told of this policy by that employee over there, and I thought I'd save them from being called out publicly like I was. Right on cue, the same employee walked over. She apologized to the couple and told them to ignore me, saying that parents were allowed in the children's section with their children. I questioned her about the contradiction. I pointed out that she had just told me the children's section was only for individuals under the age of 12 and had made me leave because I was over 12. I asked if she was saying there was one rule for me and another for them. The couple looked between me and the employee, seeing something wasn't right. The father said they needed to speak to a manager. The employee tried to say that wasn't necessary, but the mother insisted, saying she wanted to know what was going on. The employee went to get the manager, who appeared a few minutes later. He was an older man with glasses and a friendlier demeanor. The manager asked what the problem was, and the dad explained the situation. Then the manager turned to me. The manager asked what I had been doing in the children's section. I explained that I was looking for birthday presents for my 5-year-old cousin who loves reading. I told him that his employee had told me I had to leave because the section was only for people 12 and under, and I was just letting these folks know about the policy so they wouldn't get in trouble like I did. The manager's expression changed immediately. He looked at his employee and said there was absolutely no such policy. He asked why she would tell me that. The employee said something about store safety, but the manager cut her off, saying they would talk about it later and that this was the second time now. He then turned back to me and the couple. I apologized to them both for making them part of this. The mother said they understood and agreed that what happened was unfair to me. The manager apologized to all of us and explained that there was no age restriction for the children's section. He told me I was welcome to browse any section of their store and offered to bring any books I wanted to the front register if that would save me some time. I thanked him but said not to worry about my time as I had plenty that day. I walked back into the children's section, sat down in one of the small chairs meant for kids, grabbed a book from the shelf behind me, and started reading. I looked at the employee who had hassled me until she finally turned and walked away. I ended up buying 3 books for my cousin, who loved them, and as for Borders books, well, they went out of business a few years later. I'm a single parent raising my daughter who just turned 10. She's a sweet kid, straight A student, loves animals, and helps around the house without being asked. Her mom passed away when she was 4, so it's been just the 2 of us. I work as an IT specialist which pays the bills but doesn't leave much for luxuries. When my daughter needed new clothes for school, we went to the clearance sales at the local mall. My daughter wanted this t-shirt with cartoon characters for months. I found it online at a good price and bought it for her. She wore it almost every other day since it arrived 2 weeks ago. We were looking through the children's section when I heard my daughter yelp in pain. I turned around to see a security guard grabbing her by the collar of her new t-shirt, almost lifting her off the ground. His knuckles were white from gripping so hard, and customers nearby froze in shock. I told him to release my daughter. The security guard said my daughter was a thief who had been caught on their cameras stealing clothes weeks ago. He said they had been waiting for her to return. His badge read, Head of Security, and he spoke loudly enough for everyone around us to hear the accusation. My daughter's face was turning red, partly from embarrassment as shoppers stared, but mostly because this man was choking her with her own shirt. Her small hands tried to loosen his grip but couldn't. I told him he was making a mistake and that my daughter had never stolen anything. I told him to let her go. I showed him my receipt for the shirt from 2 weeks ago, but he knocked it from my hand. My daughter was crying, struggling to breathe as the guard tightened his grip and started dragging her toward the back of the store. Her feet barely touched the ground as he pulled her. My daughter called to me for help, saying she didn't do anything. Her voice was strained and scratchy. The security guard told her they had video evidence and that I couldn't help her. He mentioned something about teaching kids lessons early as he yanked her forward. I tried to reason with him again, following as he pulled my child through the store. Several shoppers had taken out their phones and were recording. I said she was clearly a child, and that whatever he thought he saw on camera was wrong. I said I would call the police if he didn't release her. I tried blocking his path, but he shoved past me. The guard said he was the authority and that the cameras don't lie. He said the shirt my daughter was wearing matched what the thief had worn. He added that parents are always blind to their kids' crimes. My daughter's face was turning purple, and the guard wouldn't listen. When he yanked her again and she made a choking sound, something in me snapped. Her eyes met mine, wide with fear. I kicked him between his legs. The security guard let go of my daughter and fell to the floor. I grabbed my daughter and held her close as she gasped for air, crying. I checked her neck and saw harsh red marks forming. Soon the store manager and 2 police officers came toward us. The manager was yelling about how I had attacked his security staff, and the police put me in handcuffs. The cold metal bit into my wrists. The first police officer told me I was being detained for assault. One officer was taking statements from witnesses. I explained that he was choking my daughter and pointed out the marks on her neck. I told them to check the store's security footage of what just happened. My daughter was sobbing, red marks visible around her neck. A kind shopper gave her some water and stayed with her while I was restrained. The second officer asked if this was about the shoplifting from 2 weeks ago. He took notes in a small pad. The store manager said yes, mentioning they had camera evidence and the shirt matched. He kept saying they had a zero-tolerance policy. The first officer said we should review the footage. He took my ID and ran a background check, which came back clean. They took us to the security office, my daughter holding on to me despite my handcuffs. The security guard limped after us, still looking at my daughter. He kept saying he was just doing his job. In the office, they showed the footage from 2 weeks ago. It showed someone in a similar t-shirt taking clothes and leaving. But it wasn't my daughter. The thief had the same shirt but was much taller and had different colored hair. The second officer said the person in the video was an adult woman, about 20 years old, not a child. He measured both figures against a height marker on the door. The security guard said the shirt was the same. He refused to acknowledge his mistake. The first officer asked if the guard had attacked a minor because she wore a mass-produced shirt sold in stores everywhere. He seemed genuinely angry at the guard. They took off my handcuffs. The police officers said sorry and asked if I wanted to press charges against the security guard for attacking a minor. They handed me their cards with case numbers written on them. I said yes and that I would be talking to my lawyer about suing the store too. My hands were shaking from adrenaline. The security guard said he was just doing his job. He wouldn't look at my daughter anymore. I asked if his job included choking innocent children. I took pictures of my daughter's neck for evidence. 3 months later, the security guard faced criminal charges and we won our lawsuit against the store. They paid a lot of money that went to my daughter's college fund. The store made new training rules for their security staff and the guard lost his job. The court ordered him to take anger management classes. My daughter still has nightmares sometimes, but she's seeing a counselor who's helping her. She hasn't worn that t-shirt since. We donated it along with the money from the settlement to a children's rights organization. I retired 5 years ago. After 40 years as a mechanic, I spend my days with my garden and my classic 1989 Ford that I've kept since I bought it new. My son teases me about that car, but keeping something running for over 3 decades gives me pride. Today was like any Tuesday. I had coffee, read the paper, and went out for weekly shopping. The supermarket was busy, but I found everything and wanted to get home for the football match starting soon. Walking back to my car with my cart, I saw a large black SUV pulling next to mine. The driver was a hefty man who needed extra room. What wasn't fine was how he solved his space problem. Instead of finding a spot at the row end or a wider family space, he parked with 2/3 of his vehicle in my space. His passenger side almost touched my driver's door, blocking me from getting in. I waited by my vehicle thinking he might adjust his parking, but he turned off his engine, squeezed out of his vehicle, and started walking away. I asked him if he could move his car because I couldn't get into mine. The man turned around, his face twisting into a scowl. He looked me up and down like I was an insect. He told me that he was already parked and that I should back off or wait for him to return. He kept walking, leaving me standing beside my blocked car. My blood pressure rose, but I avoid arguments with strangers. I checked my watch. The match wouldn't start for an hour, so I used the time. I needed a new garden hose from the hardware store across the parking lot. In the store, I noticed a clearance bin with bike locks for £2.99. They were cable type, about a meter long with a simple combination lock. Not very secure for a bicycle, which explained the clearance price, but I got an idea. I bought one with my garden hose and walked back to the parking lot. My car was still blocked, with no sign of the driver. Looking around to make sure nobody watched, I uncoiled the bike lock. With fingers still nimble from decades of mechanical work, I threaded the cable through the SUV's front wheel rim and looped it through a nearby shopping cart frame. I locked it, set a random combination, and walked away with my cart. I didn't want real trouble for the man. The lock was flimsy enough that he could remove it in 15 minutes or call for help. But it would inconvenience him like he did to me and maybe make him think twice about parking that way again. After returning my cart, I decided to leave. I called my son, who lives 10 minutes away, and he picked me up with my shopping. I left my car in the lot, planning to return, when the space next to it was empty. When my son arrived, I thanked him for the lift and said I'd explain on the way. He asked what happened, saying this wasn't like me. I told him sometimes a lesson needs teaching. During the drive, I told him everything. My son laughed. He asked how I thought of using a bike lock. I told him fixing problems for 40 years makes you creative, and simple solutions often work best. My son wished he could see the man's face when he returned to his car. I agreed. We got my car that evening without problems. I never saw that Parker again, but maybe he learned something. Not about courtesy, people rarely change, but that actions have results, even in a supermarket parking lot. And for £2.99, it was a bargain. I've been living in a semi-rural area for about 5 years now. It's peaceful out here, with plenty of space for my little homestead. I work in veterinary medicine at a small clinic about 20 minutes from my house, and I've been raising chickens for nearly 4 years. When I started with chickens, it was just something I wanted to try. I did my research, built a proper coop, and bought my first 6 hens from a local farmer. Over time, I've learned much about chicken care, their behaviors, and all the quirks that come with raising poultry. I've expanded my flock gradually and now have around 15 chickens that provide me with more than enough eggs. Recently, with egg prices going through the roof, everyone suddenly wants to be a chicken keeper. It's become ridiculous. The local farm supply stores can barely keep chickens in stock, and whenever they announce a shipment, there's a line around the building. Most of these people have zero experience with livestock, but they all want instant eggs. Last Tuesday, I needed to pick up some medication for one of my older hens and some feed, so I headed to Tractor Supply. It wasn't busy that afternoon, which was a nice change. As I was gathering my supplies, one of the clerks who knows me from my regular visits approached me. The clerk told me they had received a surprise shipment of about 40 chickens that morning. He asked if I would be interested in any of them. I told him that I could use a few new layers and asked if he could set aside 4 for me, saying I'd pay when I checked out. The clerk said it wouldn't be a problem and that he'd have them ready at the register. I finished gathering my supplies and headed to check out. There was only one person ahead of me in line, a woman in her mid-40s wearing jeans and white sneakers that had never seen a day of farm work. She was tapping her foot as the clerk rang up her gardening supplies. When the clerk finished ringing her up, the woman noticed the container of chicks behind the counter. The woman told the clerk she wanted to buy some chickens. The clerk asked her how many she would like. The woman hesitated, then said she wanted at least a dozen eggs a day and asked how many chickens that would require. The clerk told her that a healthy hen lays about 5 to 6 eggs a week on average. So for a dozen eggs daily, she would need about 14 to 16 chickens. The woman complained about the number but agreed to take 16 chickens. The clerk started putting the chicks into a transport box while explaining the price. The woman kept looking at the tiny chickens with a confused expression. These chicks were very young, small, fluffy things that were only about 2 months old at most. Then the woman asked how soon they would start laying eggs, suggesting it might be in 2 to 3 weeks. The clerk looked puzzled by her question and told her that it would take 8 to 9 months, since the chickens were still young. The woman's face turned red. She started shouting that this was ridiculous and unacceptable. She yelled that she couldn't wait that long for eggs and demanded that the clerk do something about it. I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. What did she expect? That chickens would start producing eggs on her schedule? The clerk said he was sorry but told her that it was simply biology. He said that chickens don't start laying until they reach maturity at around 6 to 9 months, depending on the breed. The woman asked if they had any chickens that were ready to lay eggs immediately. The clerk said they didn't currently have any mature hens for sale, only pullets, young chickens that still needed time to grow. The woman said this was false advertising, saying they were selling chickens that didn't even lay eggs. At this point, I spoke up. I said the chickens would lay eggs, but needed time to grow up first. I compared it to expecting a 6-year-old human child to have babies. The woman turned around to look at me, telling me that nobody asked for my opinion. She said she needed eggs now because of the prices, not in a year. I said that 9 months isn't a year, and suggested that if she needed eggs immediately, the grocery store was just down the road. The woman said she wanted to speak to a manager. The clerk called the manager over, who told her the same thing. Chickens need time to mature before they can lay eggs. The woman called them all scammers. She knocked over a display of chicken feed bags on her way out, shouting about how she would never shop there again and would tell all her friends about this scam. The manager, clerk, and I all stood there watching this woman throw a tantrum over basic chicken biology. The manager said sorry for the scene and asked if I still wanted my 4 chickens. I said I did, and unlike the angry woman, I could wait for my eggs. We all laughed about it. The clerk told me they'd had several similar incidents lately with people expecting instant egg production. I took my new chickens home, added them to my separate coop for young birds, and called my co-workers at the vet clinic to share the story. We all laughed about the woman who thought she could rush Mother Nature. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.